The waters of the Persian Gulf did not just hold the weight of a 1,000-ton naval armada. They held the terrifying, suffocating potential for World War III. At the center of this volatile, hyper-lethal maritime theater sailed the United States ship Gerald R. Ford, the absolute pinnacle of American nuclear power, projecting undeniable dominance across a region that was already resting on a razor's edge. The 5,000 sailors and Marines aboard the colossal vessel moved through their night shifts with a quiet, practiced discipline, unaware that a shadow of existential annihilation was already descending upon them from the deep mountain ranges of Iran. The night was unusually dark, the black, mirror-like ocean surface reflecting nothing but the faint starlight and the cold amber floodlights of the 4.5-acre flight deck. On the deck, the methodical hydraulic ballet of launching and recovering F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters continued in perfect synchronized rhythm. Below the waterline, surrounded by multiple layers of classified composite armor, 2 A-1B nuclear reactors hummed with limitless, terrifying energy, fueling the 4 massive bronze propellers that drove the floating island of reinforced steel at over 30 knots. For the young men and women standing watch on the exterior decks, checking weapons, pylons, and fuel connections, the night was entirely routine. They were secure. They were invisible. They were on the most advanced, most heavily defended floating fortress ever built by human hands. But 300 miles inland, concealed deep within the impenetrable rock formations and reinforced concrete tunnels of the Zagros Mountains, the Iranian Military Command Center was finalizing its own catastrophic plan. The order radiated directly from the supreme leadership in Tehran, transmitted via hardened fiber optic lines to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force. In a subterranean missile complex completely immune to traditional American bunker-busting munitions, heavily camouflaged doors carved directly into the sides of the mountains began to slide open, revealing the dark, starry sky above. Moving slowly out of the subterranean darkness were a dozen multi-wheeled transporter erector launchers. Secured to the backs of these heavy tactical vehicles were the crown jewels of the Iranian strategic arsenal, the Zulfagar and the Fatah hypersonic ballistic missiles. These were not the crude, inaccurate weapons of previous conflicts. These were highly advanced, solid-fuel rockets equipped with maneuvering re-entry vehicles and active terminal guidance radar, specifically designed to defeat and overwhelm the most sophisticated naval defense systems in the entire world. The target coordinates were locked dead center on the enormous, unmistakable thermal and electromagnetic signature of the USS Gerald R. Ford. The launch sequence was initiated without a single warning klaxon, without any radio chatter to intercept. The solid rocket boosters ignited with a blinding, earth-shattering flash of fire, illuminating the hidden valleys for miles. A dozen hypersonic missiles tore themselves free from the gravitational pull of the Earth, accelerating at a horrifying, mind-bending rate. Within seconds, they broke the sound barrier, creating a series of sonic booms that echoed across the desert landscape. They punched through the dense lower atmosphere and entered the dark, frictionless void of the exosphere, their massive solid-fuel engines leaving terrifying white contrails stretching back toward the Iranian coast. They were traveling at over Mach 7, more than 5,000 miles per hour. The flight time to the American carrier strike group was calculated at exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Back on the Persian Gulf, the illusion of safety was shattered in a matter of milliseconds. Aboard the USS Roosevelt, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer acting as the primary air defense escort for the entire strike group, the octagonal panels of the massive ANSPY-1 phased array radar system detected the unique high-velocity thermal blooms rising over the Iranian mountain ranges. The incredibly advanced artificial intelligence of the Aegis combat system did not hesitate. It instantaneously analyzed the parabolic trajectories, calculated the terrifying speed, and confirmed the horrifying, unthinkable reality. The tactical action officer, sitting in the freezing, blue-illuminated Combat Information Center, stared at the glowing radar console as a dozen hostile red icons materialized out of the dark void, diving straight towards the center of his formation. The blood drained from his face, but his training took over completely. He grabbed the secure radio handset, broadcasting on the encrypted strike group command net. His voice was cold, mechanical, and entirely devoid of emotion. A delivery of the most terrifying words a sailor can hear: vampire, vampire, vampire. Multiple inbound ballistic tracks. Targeted impact, carrier actual, weapons free. Engage all targets. Instantly the general quarters alarm, a shrill mechanical scream, echoed through the metallic corridors of every single ship in the massive fleet. Red lights flashed furiously. Heavy steel watertight bulkhead doors automatically slammed shut and locked, sealing the ships into isolated, survivable compartments. 5,000 American sailors on the carrier scrambled to their battle stations, pulling on flame-retardant flash gear, gas masks, and heavy Kevlar helmets, their hands shaking as they braced for impact. On the flight deck of the Gerald R. Ford, the air boss screamed over the loudspeakers, "Emergency scramble!" Every FA-18 Super Hornet and F-35 already hooked to a catapult was launched with bone-jarring, neck-snapping force, thrown into the black sky simply to get them off the floating target. The carrier's dual nuclear reactors were pushed past their red lines to maximum emergency output. The massive ship shuddered violently as the rudders were thrown hard over, leaning the 100,000-ton fortress into aggressive, evasive maneuvers in a desperate attempt to ruin the incoming missile's terminal targeting telemetry. But dodging a weapon traveling at Mach 7 is impossible. The survival of the entire carrier depended entirely on the automated shield of its escort ships. The automated defense systems took over. There was no time for human interaction. Human reaction time was too slow for hypersonic warfare. The computers were now fighting the war. The outer layer of defense engaged first. On the forward decks of the destroyers USS Roosevelt and USS Cole, the armored hatches of the Mark 41 vertical launch systems blew open. With a deafening continuous roar that physically shook the internal organs of the sailors below deck, a massive volley of RIM-161 Standard Missile 3s erupted from the ships. The SM-3 is the absolute pinnacle of American naval air defense, an extended-range exo-atmospheric interceptor designed to fly into space and destroy incoming ballistic warheads using pure kinetic energy, essentially hitting a bullet with another bullet in the dark void of the exosphere. The night sky above the Persian Gulf became a chaotic, terrifying web of brilliant white rocket exhaust and blinding flashes of light. High in the upper atmosphere, right at the edge of space, the American interceptors met the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. A series of brilliant, entirely silent explosions illuminated the stratosphere. The SM-3 kill vehicles achieved direct kinetic kills, pulverizing the incoming warheads instantly into harmless showers of glowing titanium and carbon fiber debris that burned up harmlessly the atmosphere. Radar operators watched their screens with bated breath, their knuckles white as they gripped their consoles, watching the red icons disappear one by one. Milo. But it was a saturated attack, a tactic designed to overwhelm the Aegis processors. Deep in the exosphere, through the chaotic debris field, 4 of the Iranian hypersonic missiles managed to slip through the outer defensive umbrella. They breached the atmosphere, entering their terminal dive phase, protected by thermal ablative shielding and accelerating towards the carrier at terrifying, inescapable speeds. The friction of the air superheated the warheads, turning them into glowing, blinding meteors of pure kinetic destruction. Time to impact: 45 seconds. As the remaining warheads breached the inner defensive perimeter, the secondary layer of the American fleet's defense system activated automatically. The vertical launch cells on the cruisers and destroyers erupted once again, this time spitting out a massive volley of RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles and RIM-174 Standard Missile 6s. These were the atmospheric interceptors, highly agile rockets designed to dogfight incoming missiles within the Earth's atmosphere. The sky became a terrifying, three-dimensional battlefield. The American interceptors pulled mind-bending gravitational maneuvers, chasing the hypersonic warheads through the dark sky. 3 of the remaining 4 Iranian missiles were intercepted and destroyed in massive, blossoming fireballs, just miles above the ocean surface, the shockwaves creating localized squalls of wind and rain. But one missile remained. It was the Fatah hypersonic glide vehicle. It had executed a completely unpredictable aerodynamic pull-up maneuver during its terminal dive, dodging the evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. It was dropping out of the sky at an impossibly steep angle, traveling at Mach 5. Its active targeting radar completely locked onto the massive, undeniable thermal and electromagnetic signature of the USS Gerald R. Ford's flight deck. Inside the carrier, the general quarters alarm was drowned out by the terrifying, roaring sound of the incoming warhead ripping through the atmosphere. Thousands of sailors dropped to the decks, covering their heads, waiting for the end. It was down to the absolute last line of defense, the point defense systems. The Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, affectionately known as R2-D2, word to life, the completely automated, self-contained, radar-guided 20mm Gatling gun instantly locked onto the blinding heat signature of the incoming warhead. Radar tracked the threat and calculated the lead angle in milliseconds, opening fire with a terrifying mechanical sound exactly like heavy canvas being ripped apart. The Phalanx unleashed a solid wall of depleted uranium, armor-piercing incendiary rounds, firing at a staggering rate of 4,500 rounds per minute. A solid beam of red tracer fire intersected the terminal path of the incoming missile. Less than half a mile from the carrier's port-side hull, a distance covered in a fraction of a second, the sheer kinetic energy from the Phalanx finally found its mark. Depleted uranium slugs shredded the aerodynamic control surfaces and penetrated the warhead casing. The hypersonic warhead detonated mid-air. The explosion was apocalyptic. A blinding flash of light temporarily blinded every single sailor on the exterior decks of the strike group. The concussive shockwave hit the side of the USS Gerald R. Ford like a physical hammer. Windows on the commanding officer's bridge shattered instantly. A massive tower of displaced ocean water and burning metallic debris washed over the lower hangar bay elevator decks. But as the deafening roar faded and the massive cloud of black smoke began to clear in the harsh, flashing emergency lights, the silhouette of the colossal warship emerged from the darkness. The ship was battered, but the hull was intact. The flight deck was unbroken. The nuclear reactors were still online and pumping out maximum power. The Gerald R. Ford had taken a direct hypersonic punch to the jaw, and it had survived. The attack had been defeated, but the smoldering debris of the Iranian missiles had not even hit the ocean surface before the President of the United States, speaking via encrypted satellite link from the Situation Room, authorized the counterstrike. The United States Navy does not simply absorb an act of war without delivering total annihilation. Strike Group 9 transitioned instantaneously from a posture of desperate defense to maximum, unrelenting offense. The smoke from the defensive interceptors was still billowing when the FA-18 Super Hornets and F-35C Lightning IIs were launched from the carrier deck, their steam catapults firing in rapid succession, carrying their heavy payloads of joint direct attack munitions and laser-guided bombs into the black sky. Simultaneously, deep in the hulls of the escorting cruisers and submarines lurking below the surface, the vertical launch cells opened once again. This time it was not for defense. A relentless barrage of Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles blasted out of their silos, their turbofan engines igniting as they leveled off just feet above the ocean waves. They formed a terrifying, unstoppable swarm of low-flying robotic assassins, their onboard inertial navigation systems guided by satellite telemetry, heading directly towards the Iranian coast. Less than 30 minutes after the Iranian military had attempted to sink the American aircraft carrier, the launch sites, the subterranean command centers, the anti-ship missile batteries, the early warning radars, and the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were reduced to smoldering, irradiated craters of glass and concrete. The American counterattack was swift, precise, and absolute. The message delivered with devastating firepower to Tehran and to the entire world watching the chaotic updates across social media was uncompromising. The United States aircraft carrier remains the undisputed sovereign of the seas, and any attempt to strike it will result in the immediate and total annihilation of the aggressor. The Persian Gulf was no longer just a zone of tension, it was now a fully active, hyper-lethal theater of war, and the United States military had just locked down the entire chessboard.